So I thought I'd start it off with an engineering joke. How do you tell the difference between an extroverted engineer and an introverted engineer? The extroverted engineer looks at your shoes while he's talking. The first thing we're going to do is start this off is go to one of the questions that came in on Twitter, which is, I've heard editing requires 60 to 70 hours a week and a constant scramble for work. I work hard, but that sounds awful. Is it true?
I've been editing since 1968.
Same film, right?
11 to 6. Those are my hours. I feel if you can't get it done in that amount of time, you don't know what you're doing. Now, when I did studio pictures, I have to get in by 9:30.
And you stay till when? Midnight?
Never.
No.
Oh, let me give you an example. I did a movie. They shot for like 21 days. Finished shooting on Thursday. Final dailies on Friday. Monday was final cut. And I didn't work the weekend. Is that fast?
That's fast.
But I'll bet you.
That's the God's truth.
Bet you Glenn does.
And by the way, you look at that movie, it's a very well cut movie.
I believe you. All right, let's hear from some of our other editors. So what do you say, 60 to 70 hour weeks? True or false?
I mean, it's possible. That's certainly on the long side. Particularly when you're starting out. If you love what you're doing, it's not like work. And I'm not saying that means, oh yeah, just don't have a life, just do everything. But when you are starting out and you're getting the opportunity to do stuff you haven't done before, when you're learning, those hours go by very fast. Now, I certainly worked those hours and more when I was younger. And again, I'm not a fan of the one-upsmanship. I had 7 all-nighters in a row. I had 2 all-nighters in my career, both like 30 years ago, and I was determined to never have another one. But there are long hours sometimes, and it's challenging, and sometimes it is hard to find work.
So I must just be a much crappier editor than everyone here.
Yes.
Because I'm used to far longer hours than either of you do.
But you love it. You like to work those long hours.
Of course. What I'm always looking at is the union contract before you break into overtime for our own union, 700, is, I believe it's 56 hours before we break in. Yeah, 57.6 or something like that.
But that you don't go into overtime until after 12 hours.
Right, so that's my point. That built into the contract is the fact that before you do OT, it's 12 hours a day. I think to answer that question is our own union agrees that those hours, 60 hours a week, are basically standard. But that's, I think, mindset. It's really hard to leave a director who's flipping out at 10 p.m. at night.
Our editors work, we have many editors working on the same show, working pretty much independently. They'll talk to me, they'll show me cuts, but nobody's in their room with them. They make their own hours, they have cuts to make, they have deadlines, they are in charge of their own hours and meeting those deadlines, and everybody has to put in a good number of hours to meet those deadlines, but it's doable.
So is it fair to say if somebody is thinking 60 to 70 hours, that sounds horrible, that perhaps they should think of another career?
Or different parts of it. A friend of mine who's been working on Law and Order for years chose Law and Order because you can have a real life outside of it, and that's the way that particular job is set up, and that was super important to her.
Yeah, but you're not going to go out of college or start off with Law and Order when you're new in your career. I mean, it sounds like
you're not going to have kids either.
You also don't have the same control. We all are looking to get better control out of our lives as we go through, and so I have less of it when I'm 25 than when I'm 30 than when I'm 35.
Some people follow the path of money, the most money, absolutely, that's all that matters. Some people follow the path of, like the Law and Order guys, like, I'd rather make a little bit less money, have less stress, and have more of my own life. But it's like any career. When you're starting out, you don't have as many choices. As you move up, you can make those choices and follow paths that suit your own personal needs more.
Right.
And also, when you get more experience, you are much faster. That's one side of it. The other side of it is, now that there is no more film and shooting material is endless.
What kind of ratios are you
When I started on the West Wing, I would get an hour and a half to an hour 45 dailies a day. I could easily be done at 7. Then after a while, season 2, I was getting 4 hours of dailies a day. Now, you cannot watch 4 hours and then edit 4 hours, so I had to figure a kind of workaround way of doing it, and then I got really fast at that too. But now they're telling me people are getting 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours a day of dailies. I don't know how you manage to finish well at the end of the day.
Well, we have related to that another interesting question. How have changes in the industry altered assistant jobs in the past decade, and how can new assistants best prepare for these roles now?
They have to sync dailies, and they have to cut. I think that one of the things that's helped me out the most is my assistants were always editing. Sean Hubert was my assistant on Picnic, and he cut like 30% of the movie. I mean, how else are you going to finish? 3 days after you finish shooting a completed film?
And yet I think that is probably not a typical way of working.
No, it's not.
Right. So actually now with computers, assistants are having less chance to cut because they're in a different room.
This was an Avid show.
Right.
No, the computers make it so much faster.
For some people, and some people spend all that fast time just changing their minds.
Right. So I would say...
Let me tell you something. You got to be able to make decisions. If you can't make the decisions, don't be an editor.
I'm not talking about the editors using up all that time. I'm talking about the producers and the directors using up all that time.
Yeah.
Norm!
Well, if I could go back to Kylie's question, I think more than a quarter of what assistants need to do today is R&D, to kind of really get comfortable and know terminology, technology, as well as the art, because that's what they're going to be asked to do. They're going to be asked to do color correction. They're going to be asked to do audio work. They're going to be asked to fill out temp music in many of these situations.
Well, what is an assistant likely to do nowadays? I mean, it has changed
all of that
dramatically.
and compositing and VFX. And there are assistants who spend tons of time working in After Effects. Stuff gets bounced out to them and they do it. Not finals, but they're doing a lot of that stuff. So I think that all of the things that end up on screen, whether it's sound, music, visual effects, smoothing out dialogue the way traditionally assistants always have had, all of that, and research into things that have nothing to do with that job right now. I think that's what an assistant needs to do.
Glenn, any thoughts on this topic?
Again, our world is different. We are generating episode after episode on each show, and so it's more of a cycle of activity that the assistants do. They have a certain things that they have to do in order to move the show to the next step for online and audio.
Do they ever get a chance to cut something and have you look at it?
Or? Yeah, they do. They do.
Oh, that's good.
And so some a lot of them say, hey, they'll go to an editor and say, hey, can I cut the next on? And so there's definitely time to do that, and we encourage them to do that, and we've had several people who were assistants on Project Runway move up to editors directly.
What's your experience now with assistants?
I had one assistant who did want to cut material, and he has now been on NCIS for 1,000,000 years. I always offered it to my assistants, and yet they never seem to be interested.
Really? Is it that they don't know what they can get from that? Or?
One guy said to me, I just want to do this, save my money, and retire when I'm 50.
Right, how's that working out for him?
He just sent me emails saying that he's now cutting a film.
3 of my assistants have won Academy Awards.
That's
amazing. What I'm proud of.
Woo!
How about that?
That's great. It's really
I'll tell you who they are. Scott Conrad, Glenn Farr, and Arthur Schmidt won 2 Academy Awards.
Very
cool. He was your assistant? That's awesome.
They were all my assistants.
See, maybe, I'm telling you, be this guy's assistant,
and they
right?
cut for me, too, and saved my ass.
Very cool.
And I took credit for all their work.
Isn't that the way it always happens, right? So we have another Twitter question. How does somebody over the age of 40 break into the business?
Oy. How does anybody over the age of 40 stay in the business?
Oh, yeah, that's a better question, huh?
Yeah.
But
Is it possible to break in the business when you're over 40?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you just have to go through the same paths that you do if you're 25. It's going to be harder when you're that age, and I'm sure there are different perceptions of people that age, but I don't know if I have
40
any.
is the new 20 anyway.
So
Yeah, that's what you like to say, right?
You better be a great writer to
be an
break in at 40.
But I don't know if
You're
there's.
not going to break into editing at 40.
Yeah.
And if I can also say, I think we're defining business rather narrowly in terms of features and network television. And I think that that's too narrow a look at where
Certainly
someone
that's
could
true.
go. And whether you're 25 or whether you're 40, there's so many other possibilities for exciting, interesting editing gigs. YouTube is pushing this right now because they realize that they need to improve the quality of what they've got there. So they're looking for people all the time. If we broaden our definition of what the business is, I think the answer to that question is far more attainable than if you want to break into high-end features where it'll be harder but still possible.
Be flexible. Be tenacious and be flexible, right?
Exactly. Does anyone here have any
Audience
questions?
questions, please.
Have any of you guys ever been able to negotiate points or residual income from the editor's chair?
It's all a question of power.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. How much are they worth? Yeah.
0. They have
It's
to
so
be,
rare. It's so
They have
rare.
to. You could negotiate for them. They have to be given. The problem is so few pictures go into profit. I had a percentage of Down and Out in Beverly Hills, which was one of Disney's most successful movies after Eisner took over at the studio. Now, and they were tied to the director's points. And God bless Paul, since he's passed away.
Yeah.
I think he kept my points into his grave.
If you're in a position to negotiate for points, you're pretty far along in your career, and there's
Or either that or at the very beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, as a writer, sometimes I've been asked to write for points, and my problem is, how do you value a point? What does that mean, a point? A point of what?
That's why lawyers make more money off of this than editors do.
Exactly.
My
Yes, what's
experience
your
was
experience?
they couldn't pay me, and so
Right.
they said they'd give me points. So
Yeah, points are, to me,
it's
points mean
nothing.
free.
Yeah.
Editors never get residuals, do they?
The
No.
residuals go
No.
to
Not
our
very
health
often.
plan.
Not very often.
Does it happen sometimes, Richard?
It has to be given.
Right, but does
You know what
anybody
I mean?
give it?
There have been cases.
We have another question.
If I were hiring an editor, of course I'd want them to be able to use all the different software, but I'd also probably ask them, how do you approach a scene? How do you create tension? How do you create comedy? If you can't articulate what you do as an artist, then that is part of the business. Can you elucidate just a little bit of your approaches on the actual craft of editing?
Every interview I've ever had is different, so there's
Yeah.
not one answer to that. I think sometimes I've sat with the director and watched a scene from another movie, and we talk about that. Sometimes we talk about the script. Sometimes we talk about our kids' soccer game, so that there's no one answer to that.
I've always said the film tells me how to cut it. My students ask me constantly, what is the comedic editing style? What is what are these styles? Teach us about styles. It's not about styles.
But
It's
I
really-
understood I'm sorry, but I understood the question is, how do you convey to a director what your style is? Or
Editors really aren't paid to have style exactly. They're paid to absorb what the style of the individual film is.
I actually approach cutting reality largely the same way I do if I'm doing a feature. I try to figure out how to make that work, and it's trickier because you don't have all the stuff you need. But I think if I had that, if I was writing this scene, how would I do it the same way as I would do it in a feature? And I try to use whatever little bits and pieces I have to create the scene that I want to create out of this reality.
Okay, looks like we have another question.
So in today's world, tons of editors, pretty much anyone with a laptop, there's tons of platforms. How do we protect ourselves and how do we value ourselves?
You better have a strong sense of self-worth. Let me give you an example. I went in for an interview with a very established director, a guy by the name of Herb Ross. Very good. And I heard he was a real nasty son of a bitch. I heard it from another editor who edited it.
Hey, be careful, this is going out on the internet.
Oh, go. What difference does it make? He's dead. So I go in for this interview. This is the God's truth. I come in for this interview, and he's behind his desk. Richard, I'll be back in 1 minute. Of course, he strategically had placed on his desk, because it was facing me, his appointments. And I saw the other editors that he was meeting after me. This is an evil fucking thing to do. So I said, he tried to get me uneasy about where I was educated and where he was educated. And then he started talking about his big problem was, she gained weight. She was in Body, the blonde girl.
I hope she's dead,
This
too.
was like she's like the third man.
We don't need her name. Cut to
So
the
I
chase.
forget what I did, But I noticed on the list there, Priscilla Ned, and she had been my assistant on American Gigolo. So I went off on some tangent or something. He was so full of shit.
Really?
And of course, I knew I didn't get the job.
So self-worth, Richard, self-worth.
Be strong. Have confidence in yourself and know the right thing's going to happen for you. Because if you don't have that, nobody else will.
That's a good piece of advice, Glenn.
And I would just say, again, I don't know, depending on where you're at, you know what's of value to you. It may be worth it to do something for points, for free, in order to get that experience, in order to work with somebody you want to work with, in order to work on the kind of thing you want to work with. Like I say, I got the job doing Borderline, no-name music video, because no real editor would work that cheaply. I was working like cheaper than my assistant rate, but it paid off in that case. Plenty of people have worked for stuff that didn't pay off, but I think that you have to just have a sense of, you can't say, well, I won't work for less than this or that. You may paint yourself into a corner that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just by being open to the possibilities, try to follow what you think has potential for what you're looking to do, and hopefully that'll work out for you.
And don't you feel also that you never stop paying dues, in a sense? I mean, even though you progress in your career, you never really stop paying dues on a certain
I would
level.
look at it in maybe a more positive way. I would say that you should never stop learning on any job.
I like that. I like that reframe.
And that's actually, if I go into a job saying, what can I learn from this job? Then I usually am able to value what I'm doing. I'm able to value the experience. Always, unless I'm working with assholes.
Right.
Oh yeah, I think what Norman said is so true, because every time I try and hold up to this standard, I try and go into a job pretending like I know nothing. Don't project, anticipate, or imagine what it's going to be, because you never know what it's going to be.
Right.
Good point. Glenn, did you have
So
something?
crazy.
I was gonna say,
I think it's really a great attitude.
The only thing I ever did for free was 15 years ago, I did this recut of this silent film called Greed from 1924 that for Turner Classic Movies that I was supposed to get a little bit of money. It's for a friend of mine. And anyway, I didn't do it for the money, and it meant nothing to my resume, and I never got any money. And it was one of my favorite jobs. I just love doing that. Of all the jobs I've done, I think that it seemed like the most noble thing I've ever done, working on this weird silent movie that very few people will ever see. But I love silent movies, and I love doing that, and that was of great value to me. So it's not always the money. Yeah.
So you worked with Eric von Stroheim.
Exactly. No, it's funny, on IMDb it listed as, the 1924. It was called the narrative reconstruction using stills and the original
that's so cool.
script.
I mean, it is cool. And then doesn't that wrap around to that idea of, if you're working 70 hours, if you love what you do, it's not 70 hours. You didn't make a penny, but you loved what you were doing.
Right, and I was working on Real World till 4 in the afternoon and then driving across town and working on that till 10 at night.
All right, we have another Twitter question. What must-have edit skills for new postgrads? Focus and specialize or generalist? Tech/aesthetic/people skills, ? People need to be generalists, right? They need to learn everything.
All that stuff.
And then they need tech, they need aesthetic, they need people skills?
Absolutely.
Is there more to say on this topic? I felt like we kind of answered it, but...
Just remove the question marks and you're done.
Yeah. You were saying, Norm, that beginning editors have to learn After Effects, they have to learn. What other packages should they learn?
What I recommend they do is find the people who they really would like to be in 10 years and track them down through any way they can. So if they see an interview on Post magazine or Art of the Guillotine, or if they get a chance to kind of follow them somehow on social media, and then try and meet them and say to them, what's missing in my resume so I can be where you are in 10 years? Then you'll get the best answers you can, because these are the people who you respect. I think every year the packages change. I would just say that you need to be as comfortable with the technology in those 5 things I mentioned: the picture, the sound, the music, the visual effects, and the colors.
And the color, yeah. Although that seems like such an insane set of skills.
It is. Well, my wife thinks I'm colorblind. So that I'm not the best person to hire if you want someone to color your movie. On the other hand, as a tool to help my directors or showrunners or producers visualize their story, sometimes I need to be able to color something. So it's used as a communication tool with the people who really can do it better than I can.
You can use the histograms.
That's right. No, I just use the dropper and black, white, done. Right? That's all you need.
All right, so basically everybody has to be a generalist today.
To be comfortable with a wide variety of things,
Yeah.
I think you want to be in a situation where you can say yes to any question that comes up. You know, the more you can say yes to, can you do this, can you do that, you have experience with that, can you pull this off, you know somebody who can help with this, the more you can say yes, the more often you'll get the job.
And the more valuable you become, right?
Right.
Here's another Twitter question. Where do you recommend freelancers look for work aside from references?
With Richard.
Pardon? What did you say?
With Richard.
With Richard, yes, with Richard. Yeah, that's a good plan.
Read the trade papers, write letters.
Write letters, read the trade papers.
Yeah, I got many jobs. I mean, it did help that I won the Academy Award.
Well, that's the first thing. Win an Oscar.
Win an
Then
Oscar.
Read the trade papers.
Yeah, win an Oscar as a freelancer.
I
have experience as an editor of independent films. How do I get into the studio system?
And you want to go there? Why? You got out of the studio system.
Become an assistant? Become an
No. The studio system now
is there a studio system?
Oh yeah, no, they have a hierarchy. As far as I'm concerned, it's really weird. I mean, it's like they bring in a finishing editor on comedies at the studio.
So for some reason or other, this person does want to move from independent films into the studio system, though.
I would say, why?
Is that what you say?
Why do you want to do that?
Normie, you look like you're thinking the same thing.
I would agree with that. If what you're looking for is higher prestige movies, that may not be the way to go. If you're looking for a higher salary, maybe that's not the way to go. Really, it's about the people who you work with. So if you're working with a director on a project that's like so awesome that they get offered a studio deal, then perhaps, not always, perhaps you get brought along onto that.
Right. Well, we talked about that.
The problem is the studios are not making any movies
That's
anymore.
Right. Fewer and fewer.
When I started in the business, they were making 60, 70 movies a year.
It's that middle piece that's gone. Is the independent films and the blockbusters, right?
Yeah. That's it.
And really, the why is the good question.
The why?
Why would you want to?
Yes.
Why is that a goal?
Because the best work being done in film today is on cable television.
I would agree with that, absolutely.
It's not feature films.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So I would say,
why do you want to be in the studio system? Maybe the person wants to be in the studio system of 1940 or something like that. That's what they really want, right?
Yeah.
More questions from the audience.
Okay, I'm going to relate back to a question that was asked earlier. I'm not worried about the high end. I'm worried about the low end. Where is the bottom going to stop? Because I've worked on a network animation show as an animatic editor, and I got paid less than I did as a PA in the 80s. And that was okay with them. And I needed the job, so I took it. And also, I remember back when I was starting out, running into a case of, you don't want this job? There's a kid from Nebraska who will take this job. And it's true. In our industry, there's enough people who will take the absolute lowest end.
You're talking about the race to the bottom.
Yeah. How do we sort of stop that bottom?
Union.
Though I think, honestly, Richard and Colleen have a good model in that you're doing multiple projects at one time. And I think that, especially with the ability to work internationally, if you're working on multiple things, then you don't need to necessarily get paid the same thing that we did in 2001.
But you have to work more then.
Yes. Well, welcome to the 21st century.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
what I'm doing.
That's kind of really where it's at. Thanks to schools like mine, we're like flooding the damn market, right? So that we graduate 60 undergrads a year and another 60 grads. Not all of them are editors, thank God. So a lot of them are working in editing very quickly afterwards. So that's competition.
This is the flip side of democratized tools.
Yes, that's right.
We're all feeling that, I think.
There are people who would die to work with editors like people here who are in producer directors in Malaysia, people who are working all over the world. For them to work with people with our level of experience is a gift. I think we just need to open up our eyes in terms of where our market is also.
So basically,
how do we connect to them?
That's what we're talking about here, right? Social media, getting involved, putting the word out. I've gotten jobs through Twitter.
Basically what we're saying is this is where you have to be an entrepreneur.
Exactly.
You cannot succeed today unless you're an entrepreneur.
Full circle, that's right.
Yeah, it does bring it full circle. Another question?
How do we compete with individuals that are working from the international market? I believe there was someone on the internet that was doing cuts for $5 for up to 5 or 10 minutes. And that was something that I believe Misha Tenenbaum actually sent him a sample, and it wasn't half bad.
That's a really high bar, not being half bad.
Well, I mean, you're paying $5 for...
Right, so I would suggest you don't want to work with those people. Now,
Well,
I
of course, but how
understand
do
at
we-
different points of your career, it's different, but that.
You would hope that the clientele would see the difference between that, but some people are just not going to be able to do that. How would you suggest that we sort of attempt to put a cement floor there for people like us?
I don't think you can have a cement floor.
Think out of the box. Create an image of yourself. Even though you're a film editor, you have to have a certain style, a way of presentation. You got to have the whole thing going. You can't operate in Hollywood unless you have an act. And you better figure out what your act is and what you're good at. You go in for an interview, you better have it down. And you do your best pitch. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
I mean, that's really what it boils down to, doesn't it? I don't know if that helps you. I mean, I think what we're saying is it is an extremely difficult, extremely competitive world, and yet it boils down to the same thing it's always been, which is how to present yourself and having it down.
The tools on how you present yourself and where that presentation is may be different, but it's still the same.
Thank you so much, and let's
Cheers. Thank you,
thank
everyone.
Keycode again. Thank you very much.